Well, welcome back to Vintage Farmhouse Antiques, and we've got three dinner plates which at first inspection may look very, very similar to you, but we've got a little story to tell you about the variations on this. Anyone know the pattern? I'll tell you in a second. Just have a look at these three versions of the same pattern, made by the same factory, but very, very different when you have a real close look at them. The pattern is called Blue Pagoda, and this is a pattern that was produced by factory run by Swinnertons during the period of between 1906 right the way through to 1971. And what we have here are three versions that really document the difference in production over almost 65 years. This first one I have here is a 10-inch English dinner plate. It's an early example. If I just show you the reverse of it, characteristic blue staining from the flow blue process of the glaze. 78 are the only marks on the reverse of this. If you didn't have it in relation to the other ones, you may well struggle to recognise this as being Swinnerton's production. But this is a very early dinner plate, larger than the later versions. It's also, if you have a look at the side elevation here, much deeper. Just look at the curvature on the ring here, and I'll show you the others in comparison. Also, the transfer design on it, much more detailing, less of the rich, heavy cobalt blue glazes on this example. Much lighter in the blue characteristic staining of the glaze on here. Compare that to this one that we're going to show you next. This one, look at the colour for a start. This is rich, dark cobalt blue. This is the peak of their production. This transfer design, the floral rims, palpable. There's so thick a glaze that's been put on here with the secondary firing for this pattern. And the very characteristic old Alton, Ware, England, with two rings, and the church little village scene is what is depicted in the transfer factory mark. This is from the 1920s to 1930s production, pre-Second World War. They were really at their peak of production here. It's a really popular pattern, selling really well, and this really is one of the better pieces. Look at the quality of the glazes. The ones we've got on sale of this piece are absolutely superb. And the last piece to show you, very similar but very different. First thing to note, look at the rim. Just bring the other one back in for the thickness comparison. The 1920s below, and this is much later ironstone piece from probably 1960s or 1970s. Same pattern, same level of decoration, but it's just not the same. This is the later mass production from the 60s and 70s. Still the palpable thick glazes that they were renowned for. The colour doesn't go round the rim on this later ironstone piece. The detailing on the pattern's just as good, just as crisp, but it's a far heavier piece of ironstone china. It's very robust. It will last forever. The glaze, however, doesn't. You can see all the fine glaze crazing on this, characteristic of the later pieces. Far more likely to have this fine crazing with some staining in this than you will ever get on the glazes used in the 1920s pieces. And the earlier pieces, you know, predate this by probably around 50 years, but in nowhere near as bad condition as this one in terms of its wear. Still usable, no chips or damage, nothing wrong with it, but just if you put the three plates side by side, you start to realise the difference and the types of changes that they were making during that long period of production. But you've got to remember, this pattern was an extremely popular pattern produced over that period between 1906 right the way through to 1971 when the factory finally closed. The other thing to note on this, just as a reference point, look at this little beading which is so characteristic of Blue Pagoda around the rims, and compare that to the earlier plate. These are far more detailed, far deeper indentations on that design pattern compared to the latter one. That one really doesn't give the same impression that this one is, which is almost to the eye of a ribbed wall on that rise. But very, very interesting. Oh, the other point I was going to make to you was look at the side elevation of these latter plates. Nowhere near as deep as that early example, the first one we showed you. Just let me bring that in for reference again, because it's interesting to see the late model side elevation and the very early plate. I mean, it's not a soup bowl, but it's getting there. It's really much deeper than the depth of those rims. Just let me see if I can get them side by side. You'll see that the early example overlips by a good probably 1/4 of an inch over the later examples of this china. So, hope you found that interesting. Alton Ware, Swinnertons, Blue Pagoda, period china and the changes that occurred during production. All these pieces are available for sale, incidentally, on the Vintage and Antiques website. We'll pop a link in the description below taking you through. Lots of blue Pagoda being listed. Got a whole set that we are gradually working our way through. So we love a bit of blue and white. Thanks for watching.